Hello and welcome everyone. In this part of the course, we are going to learn how to create our very own color palette. We're not going to use any outside help this time. We are only going to use the tools that are integrated on Adobe Illustrator. So let's begin. First of all, we are going to create a square here and we are going to place this shape on this layer called palette. So the first step to create your own color palette will be to choose a color that you personally like. That's it. So I'm going to do that next. So I'm going to do so by using the color panel and the HSV sliders. So I'm going to go there, and as you can see, it's all white now on the hue part. This is because the saturation is down to 0, so we need to increase it so the colors will show. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm going to select a color that I personally like a lot, that is kind of a greenish blue. So I'm going to select first the hue and then I'm going to manually fine-tune saturation and brightness until I'm satisfied with the result. It's just as simple as that. You'll probably have a different favorite color, so choose that one. It's your own color palette, so feel free to explore and experiment. So now that I have defined this color, I'm going to select this shape that is the face of the character, and I'm going to press I on my keyboard to bring the eyedropper tool and copy this color. And of course I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of the shapes that also contain the skin tone for this character. Okay, so far so good. As you can see, we're coloring the base. At the moment, we're not going to worry about the shadows and the highlights, we're going to leave them for later. Right now we're defining the basic colors of our palette. So let's start looking for the other colors. To do so, I'm going to bring up a very powerful tool that's called the Color Guide panel. So let me briefly explain what the Color Guide panel does. Basically, it creates a lot of color schemes that are based on the color that you have selected right now. So as you can see at the moment, I have complementary colors, analogous, triads, and so on. There are lots of, so to speak, color palettes automatically generated for you. So of course this is based on an algorithm on calculations that Adobe Illustrator does, so the colors may not be the prettiest, you may have to tweak them. So for example, here I'm going to use the color guides to find the complementary color for this base green, and here it is, but I want to tweak it a bit because I want it to look more reddish. So Adobe Illustrator found the exact opposite to my color across the color wheel. Of course, this is a calculation and the color may not look that good. In that case, feel free to change it and tweak it. Many times the colors that appear here on the color guide panel are not very pretty because they are just the result of an algorithm. Okay, so now we have this red color that I'm happy with, and let's apply it, for example, to the pants of this character. We'll apply this red color. Okay, and let's also use this same red color for the eye. Okay, so we have the first two colors of our palette now. At this moment, we are going to take care of finding the shadow tones for these two colors that we have created. What I'm going to do now is to take these little squares that I've created on the side, and I will try to find that color there first. So I'm going to take this little square. The first thing I'm going to do is to play with the hue, saturation, brightness values a bit. So I'm going to decrease the brightness and increase the saturation a bit. So this gives me like a darker, moodier tone of the original color, but I'm going to play with it a bit more. This is why I'm switching to CMYK sliders, and I'm going to add a tint of color because I don't want my shadows just to be a darker version of the same color. I want to add some tint. I'm adding just a dash of magenta so my shadows will have a little bit of a red tint. This goes back to color theory because shadows often have a tint a slight dash of the opposite color. So I'm happy with the result right now, and I'm going to apply this color to the illustration. I'm going to use my eyedropper tool for that. Okay, so far so good. So I am going to do the same thing here. Okay, and I am going to color this as well. So right now we have the start of our very first color palette. We have the main color and the opposite one, and we are going to try to find some more colors for it. But before we do so, I'm going to take care of the shadowy parts of this red color. So I'm going to do the same process that I did for my original one to the greenish blue one. Don't worry about getting it perfect at first, because we are going to be modifying this palette afterwards. So feel free to play with it and have some fun. So as you can see, I've added some cyan to the shadow of this red, and this is for the same reason that I've added some magenta and yellow to the shadow of the green. This is because I want some of the opposite color on the shadow, so it makes a richer color instead of just adding black. Okay, time to find the third color for this palette. I think I want some bluish color for the boots and maybe for the weapon that the character is holding. So let's look for it. So the first thing that we want to do is to create another of these little squares that I'm using to test my color palette. And I'm going to take this color and I'm going to modify the hue a bit. As you can see, I'm just playing a bit with the hue slider, and if I just do so, the colors will be similar to each other because I'm not deviating too much from my original one. This is very important for a color palette, to have colors that are similar to each other, because that will tie your entire illustration together and it will give it a sense of harmony. So have that in mind. And while I'm telling you this, on the video you can see that I'm looking for extra shades for this blue color, because as you can see on my illustration, the boots have different sections. They have shadows and highlights because they are supposed to be metallic. So I'm trying to find 3 shades of the same color. Okay, I think I got them now, and I think I may modify the original one a bit to resemble the other 2. To do so, I'm going to select Same Fill Color. This is a very useful tool that you should remember, because it will select every color that is the exact same color on your illustration, so you don't have to go hunting for them. It may be annoying to select one by one, and this will do the entire job for you. Okay, and so now that I've modified that light blue color, and I've modified too the colors on the weapon of the character at the same time, I think that this part is done and we'll move on to the next one. So I'll move to the boots of the character, and I will be reutilizing the same blue colors that I've just created for the weapon. So it's always a good idea to reutilize some colors, at least on this style of illustration, which is kind of flat and vector. And this may be a thing that I grabbed from graphic design, and it's that limited color palettes are very powerful. If you use a limited amount of colors on your illustration, it's more likely to have a visual impact. Okay, so far so good with the boots, but I need a lighter color for this part that is supposed to be a highlight, so I'm going to take care of that color now. As usual, I'm going to play around with my hue, saturation and brightness sliders to reach that color. And now I'm going to select these shapes, and I'm going to finally apply this color by using my eyedropper tool, which by the way you can bring up by pressing I on your keyboard or selecting it from your toolbar. But we're not finished yet with the boots, because as you can see there is a top part of this boot, and I want to have some yellow tones over here. So I'm going to create yet another color, a yellow tone. I'm going to repeat the same process I've been doing at this point, which is creating a new square so I can test my colors, and then I'm going to select the previous color and I'm going to modify the hue and the brightness and the saturation, of course. So by moving these sliders I will find my color. And since I know that I'm going to need a darker version of this yellow, I'm going to create another square here so I can prepare that color. Okay, so I think that this color looks a bit weird at the moment, so I'm going to switch to my CMYK sliders and I'm going to fine tune it there. For example, I'm going to remove all the cyan and maybe also decrease the magenta so it looks more like a vivid yellow and not that orange. This will be the light part and this will be the dark one. Okay. So I think I'm going to modify this color. So I'm going to select this square and I'm going to go to select, same, fill color, and then I'm going to edit all of these shapes at the same time. I'm going to subtract some magenta. There we go. And I will reutilize these colors for the belt of the character, which I'll be doing right now. Just like this. And at this point I think I'm going to create yet another variation of this yellow. I want to create one that's even lighter, even brighter. I'm going to create it here and I'm going to subtract every bit of magenta on the CMYK sliders, so it's more like a pure yellow. Okay, I'm quite happy with the result at the moment, and I'm even tempted to reutilize this bright yellow color for the boots. So I will be switching my existing colors as you can see on the video. So the lighter color on the boots will be this pure yellow. Okay, there we go. Okay, so having done that, let's create more colors. Let's go and create the equivalents for black and white on this illustration. Let's do some neutral colors, as I like to call them. So let's begin by doing the white color. I'm going to take this yellow as a reference, and here on my CMYK slider I'm going to reduce the yellow. So one thing that's worth remembering is that even if we are using the CMYK sliders a lot here, we're not changing the document color mode, so don't worry, this is still an RGB document. So now that we have this color that will act as white on our illustration ready, let's color the eyeball of the character. So, okay, and we are going to go for a darker shade of this white. So I think I'm going to decrease the brightness here on the HSB slider. There we go. I think that at the moment it's safe to close this color guide panel since we haven't been using it. So I'm going to create a color now that can act as a black. I don't like using pure white or pure white on my illustrations, and neither should you, because they don't look as good as having a somehow tinted dark color and bright color. So I'm going to use red as a start. So basically what I did is to take the red and decrease the brightness quite a lot, but not fully, and I have this rich dark reddish color. And I'm going to just apply these colors to the character. For example, I'm going to assign this color to the eyebrow of the character. Okay, and I think that at this point I may bring it up a bit. I may increase the brightness a bit just for this shape, and I'm going to take the darker color and use it for the shadow of the eyebrow, this bottom part. Okay, and I'm also going to store this new color over here with all these squares. I'm going to select this shape and color it my dark red. And then for the shine on his eye, I am going to use pure white, but just this time because it's a shiny detail. So there is one detail that's pending, and it's the highlight on the top of his head. So let's find the color for that detail now. Of course, I'm going to start with the green of the skin tone as a reference, and I'm going to change it up a bit. I'm going to, of course, increase the brightness and change the hue just a little bit so it's kind of bluish. Let's try and see how that works. As I told you before, don't worry about getting it perfect on the first try. This is a first draft, so to speak, because you can always recolor the artwork on Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to show you how later on this course. Okay, moving on, we are going to color the spikes on the weapon for this character. So we are going to use these two pre-existing colors that we already created to do so. And for these 3 spikes on the back, we are going to generate a new color that's a bit darker. Okay, so far so good. And of course, I'm going to now color the horn for this monster character that we're doing. Same color than the spikes on the weapon, and same goes for the little skull that this character has on his belt. Okay, and we are also going to take the pre-existing colors that we created, this dark red that looks like black. We're going to use them for the eyes of this skull. Okay, so now all that's left is to create this wooden color for the wooden part of the weapon of this character. So let's do that now. I'm going to take this color as a base. I'm going to increase the brightness right now, and at this point the CMYK sliders will come in handy because they give us a better sense on how the colors will change. And I know that a wooden color is quite a neutral color, something like some kind of gray. I'm going to go from gray, so I'm going to align the sliders all together on the middle, so I will generate a gray as I showed you on a previous video, and I will take it from there. So I know that at this point I'm deviating a bit from the rest of the color palette, but since this is kind of a neutral color, I think it will be a good addition to the color palette. So I ended up creating a more reddish brown. It's a saturated color after all, so I think it fits the illustration. Finally, I'm going to apply these 2 colors here to the weapon. And there we go. Okay, now on to some fine tuning. I think I want to change the skin tone of the character because I think it's too bright. It's too aggressive compared to the other colors. So as you may have anticipated, I'm going to select this square. I'm going to select same fill color so I can edit all of the elements that contain this specific color at the same time. And now at this point I'm just playing with the sliders a bit, with the RGB sliders in this case. Nothing too technical, I'm just trying to see what I like. Creating a color palette is a very organic process, so you can expect a lot of going back and forth with your decisions. For example, this was the first color that I chose, but now that it's working together with other colors, I think it needs to be adapted a bit. And I think I'm going to change also the shadow tone for this color. So naturally I'm going to repeat the same process I just did. Okay, now that the illustration and the color palette is complete, we are going to save this color scheme as a swatch. So let's do it. First of all, you need to clean your swatches. I already have done this, but you can go here to your swatches panel and click on this little icon. And under this menu, you have to click on Select All Unused. So if this swatches panel had any color that is not being currently used on this artwork, it will be automatically selected when you do that. And of course, what you want to do is to just delete it by going to this little trash can icon or just choose the delete option. So now that this is clean, you can add your own color swatches to this panel. So right now we are going to select everything here, all of our squares that we have created during the process. And I'm going to click on this option called New Color Group. So right now it's asking me for a name. I'm going to enter Goblin because I think that this character is a goblin. It may be a Cyclops, I'm not sure, it's kind of a monster. I'm going to enter Goblin, and once I've done that, we have successfully added all of our colors to our swatches panel. But right now I'm going to Ctrl Z to undo this because I want to show you another option that may be better for you. It's a bit more organized. So what I can do is to just select, for example, the reds here, only the reds, and I'm going to add a new color group and I'm going to name it reds, and there will be on folder. And after that I'm going to do the same thing for all the other color shades. Okay, so I'm, as you can see, adding the rest of the colors, the neutral tones, every color here. There we go. And the best part of all this is that you can save this swatch as an ASE file or an AI file for any future reference. If you want to reuse this, which is your very first color palette or your very own color palette if you have created one before, you can reutilize it on the future and another project, another illustration, a design. You can even upload it to the internet, so it's very useful to save these files. On the next part of this course, I'm going to teach you some very useful tools on Adobe Illustrator. So, see you next time.